Okay, welcome to Hope Community Healthy Living Inspirations Thursday night. And tonight is our special guest, Tony Robertson, Hunt for Health, Cognitive Health. We have some very special guests that is giving us some amazing information tonight. So get your notepad out and let's learn together and let's get healthy together.
Amen. Thank you, Levon. Good to see you. Good to see all the folks there and the others that are joining us via Zoom. So, how is everybody?
Woo-woo!
Can you remember how you are? All right. We're talking about cognitive health tonight. So, hopefully, when you go home, you will remember some of what we spoke about. It's not complicated stuff. It's actually pretty simple to take care of our mental health, our cognitive health. The thing is, we just need to remember to do it. All right. That's always the problem. My wife used to say to me, I need to get a notebook to write down all these things. I said, yeah, the problem is I have to remember to write it in the notebook. And that's where I fail. All right. It's all good and well. I've got the book and I've got it in my pocket and I carry it around with me. But if I forget to write in there, then what's the point? All right. So I'm going to jump right in. There's a few stats I want to show you, just a few things, a few interesting points and what have you. So I'm going to fire up the old share screen here and pull up my meeting. Where is it hiding? There. I don't want remote. This thing must just go away. And there we go. Takes forever for me to get there. All right, AD, which is Alzheimer's disease. It's also known as type 3 diabetes because of its relationship to insulin. And what they found is that if there's a decrease in your brain glucose metabolism, in other words, if your brain isn't getting the glucose that it needs, that can go on for 10 years before you see any of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So by the time they see that you've got Alzheimer's disease, the problem has been going on for 10 years already. Now, is it too late to fix it? I don't think it's too late. I always think as long as you're still sucking air, there's always a chance that we can fix things, okay? But again, I'm not here to tell you that you can fix problems. I want to show you how you can either stop them from happening or slow them down if it is already happening. So hopefully nobody has got Alzheimer's disease to the point that they don't know who they are. All right, so insulin resistance in the brain is a condition in which the amount of insulin in the brain decreases or the brain cells aren't responding to the insulin. So it's either one of those two. All right, and here's an interesting study that was done on 5,600 people. They found that memory decreased 45% faster. Your rational judgment ability declined 29% faster. And your ability to evaluate multiple cognitive functions decreased 24% more rapidly. This is in patients with diabetes. All right, so there definitely is a connection between diabetes and cognitive decline. So we have to be really, really wary of where we are in life. You know, I mean, a lot of people, they'll go get their blood work done and the doctor's going to say, oh, you're pre-diabetic. That's like being partially pregnant. All right. You're either pregnant or you're not. So you're either diabetic or you're not. If you are pre-diabetic, all it means is that 3 months from now, when you come back for more blood work, then you'll be diagnosed as diabetic because then your numbers have still gotten worse over the last 3 months. But you were already diabetic 3 months before that, maybe even 2 years before that. So we have to be really careful what it is that we're eating. And what they found in middle-aged populations that have type 2 diabetes, the duration of the illness and the degree of glycemic dysregulation, in other words, your sugar's not being absorbed properly, had a significant effect on the rate of cognitive decline. So how badly is your sugar being used or not used? And how long have you had this problem? All right. And that will determine how quickly you're going to lose it. The BBB, which is not the Better Business Bureau, that is the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier permeability of insulin is reduced with people that are obese, or have inflammation, hyperglycemic, or have diabetes. In other words, the blood-brain barrier, not everybody can get through there, and it's there for a reason. It's the same reason you don't give children under the age of 12 any aspirin, because if it gets through there, it can cause damage. All right. And it's there to protect the brain from just everything getting in there. But the insulin does need to get through there for the glucose to be absorbed in that part of the brain. But all of that function is reduced in obese, inflamed, diabetic people. So, and a decrease in muscle mass, this one's important because a lot of us are the age group where we start to slow down somewhat when it comes to physical exercise. What they found is that a decrease in your muscle mass is an important cause of the gradual increase in insulin resistance. And the reason they say that is because as we age, our muscles get a little bit smaller. But the muscles in our body are the main glucose absorbers in our body. So, for example, your kidneys don't need as much glucose as what your leg muscles do, right? Because your kidneys are just hanging there. They're just filtering blood through there. But your leg muscles help you get up from your seat. They help you walk. They help you stand. So they're very active. They need more glucose than what your kidneys do. All right. So muscles are the main glucose absorbers in your body. But when the muscles decrease because we don't use them anymore, then what happens is your blood glucose drops less. In other words, you're not getting the glucose out of your bloodstream. It's staying in your bloodstream because your muscle mass has decreased. So that then leads to increased insulin resistance. And that's why it's so important. I don't care what age a person is. Now, I guess up until 25 or so, it's not that much of a big deal because understand something, insulin is also part of the growth factor, right? So you need the insulin from when you're born until you're 25 years old. Normally at age 25, you're fully grown. You're not getting any taller, any bigger, and you're not changing. That's where you're going to be for the rest of your life. So you don't need that much insulin because you stop growing. Now we're maintaining. So your demand for insulin goes down in terms of growth. But if we keep eating like we did when we were 12 and 15 and 18, then yeah, we're going to require that much more insulin. But that just over time, that leads to problems. So we don't need so much insulin. So the body typically doesn't want to produce that much. But if you have these nice big muscles, biceps, and your legs are strong, and you're eating a glucose-based diet, that will go into those muscles. But as we get older, we tend to exercise and stay in shape a little bit less than we did when we were younger. Okay. I've seen it with my mom and people in her circle of friends. Their muscle tone, the bicep isn't firm. It's like there's something there and it's just in a bag of skin. Okay. The muscles have just slowly atrophied and kind of just gone away. So there isn't anywhere for the glucose to go. So it just hangs around in the bloodstream, and that causes the problem. So whatever age you're at, whether you're 30, 40, 60, I spoke with somebody last night whose mom is, I think she said 79. I said, it's time to get her into the gym. When a person's blood sugar levels are 270 or 300, and they say their diet is more or less okay, well, one way to get rid of some of that sugar is to have more muscles. So get into the gym, but get yourself a personal trainer, somebody that deals with the elderly people in the gym. You don't want some little snot-nosed little whippersnapper coming there and putting you down and doing bench press of 500 pounds on day one. Okay, he's going to kill you. Get somebody that understands that an older person needs a bit more time, but can work with them to help build that muscle. Because it's important. You got to have your legs strong because you got to walk. You got to get up with the chair. You got to go do things. So make sure you get some weightlifting going. All right. So when glucose is insufficient, which happens with a lot of people on a ketogenic diet, ketone bodies are then used as an alternative brain energy source. That's 100% okay, 100% normal, nothing wrong with that. The body is designed that way because if something happens that you land up, let's say you land up in a coma and you can't eat a bunch of glucose, right? Your body will just eventually switch to start burning your fat that's on your body and convert that into ketones that will then keep you alive and keep your brain fired. Okay, so don't worry about ketone bodies, they're good for you. People that have switched to a ketogenic diet or even people that have gone into carnivore diets, they typically live in a ketosis state because there's no glucose coming into the system, which is fine. Nothing to worry about. All right, the next point there, insulin resistance is pointed out as one of the direct causes of dementia. So if somebody, like I said earlier, if the doctor says you are now pre-diabetic, it means you are insulin resistant. And if you're insulin resistant, that is going to lead to dementia down the road. So we have to make sure we do not become insulin resistant. We need to maintain insulin sensitivity because that will inhibit the onset or the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So if we can maintain insulin sensitivity, in other words, when your body gets the insulin released, it actually works with the insulin and gets the sugar out of your bloodstream into the muscles where it's used and needed. Now, if you have too much glucose, it's going to get stored as fat. So we have to really, really take a good look at what we're eating. All right, and then brain insulin resistance increases oxidative stress, which is never good, which then in turn impairs mitochondrial function, cognitive function, and memory. And why is mitochondrial function so important? Well, people that have the dreaded C disease that we aren't allowed to talk about, the ones that's tumors that begin to grow and, just kind of slowly kills you. That, from everything that I've studied so far, that disease, that condition is a mitochondrial malfunction, if you will. So we have to keep the mitochondria working. The mitochondria is a little battery pack in every cell. So if that battery pack doesn't work properly, the cell malfunctions, and then it's just downhill from there. All right. So the same thing happens with your body. The same thing happens with your brain. You're going to start losing function in your brain because of insulin resistance. All righty. So question is, what do we not eat? Well, if you have any sort of insulin resistance, we want to stay away from carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, because they've taken a lot of the fiber out of a lot of the fiber out of the carbohydrates, which means it's essentially just sugar, and it's going to get straight into your bloodstream. It's going to spike your blood sugar sky high. If you have carbohydrates, let's say like the potatoes over there, they have a bit of fiber in them, which is going to slow down that process. It's still going to be glucose nonetheless, but you're not going to get that crazy insulin spike or sugar spike that's going to be on a high, and then your body's going to dump all this insulin in to try and bring it down. My suggestion is to try and avoid as many carbohydrates, whether they be good or bad carbs, for as long as possible. If you feel that you are going down this road where you're starting to forget things, and you're able to recognize that you're forgetting things, then I would suggest a serious diet change and cut your carbohydrate intake way, way down. If you can get it down to 25 grams per day, 30 grams a day, somewhere around there, that would be ideal. All right. There's a lot of things in this picture that I don't like. Well, let me put it this way. I like the bread, especially if it's fresh and warm with lots of butter on it. It's good stuff. There's no denying that. But if a person is dealing with certain challenges, and cognitive health being one of them, those foods in that picture there, other than the apples and the bananas and the oranges, I would just avoid all of those. The oats, the potatoes, the pastas, the bread, the beans, the whatever those other things are there, it looks like. I don't know what those are next to the beans. All right. Because that is going to become glucose. And if your body is insulin resistant, it cannot deal with that glucose. I don't care how slow release it is. I don't care how all natural it is, 100% out of the ground. You know, it's not a man-made glucose or carbohydrate type food. The point is, it's still a carbohydrate. It still becomes glucose. And people that have Alzheimer's disease have a glucose problem. So the choice is yours at the end of the day, you know, what you want to do or not do when it comes to your food. What I do suggest, because the brain is about 60% fat, we need to make sure we eat enough fat in our diet. But we also need to make sure we're getting enough protein in our diet. So a good source of fat and protein is these little pieces of steak right over here. They look like they could be ribeye steaks. All right. That's one of the best sources of protein and fat combinations, is that right there. Others might be like lamb chops or, you know, lamb roast, whatever, because there's lots of fat in that meat. Chicken with the skin on, some salmon. All right, very good stuff. Cold water fish, they've got lots of good oils in them. So we need to get oils into our system because oils are going to replace the carbohydrates for energy. You need the fuel to keep your body going, and that's where the fat comes in. Now, fats and proteins don't really do well. Fat essentially does nothing to your insulin response. Protein, a very small insulin response, nothing to be concerned about. But if you're going to cut out all those carbohydrate type foods, you need to replace that carbohydrate fuel with something else, which is going to be fats and oils and butter and those sort of things, and the fat that's in your meats. All right. And the protein is super important because protein is going to build new tissue. It's going to build new nerve cells, skin, muscle, brain tissue, you name it, blood. Everything that about you is built from protein, amino acids. So you have to get enough protein in your diet, and you are really going to battle to get enough protein from a plant-based diet only. So you've got to be careful where you're getting your protein from. All right. And keep in mind, the more plants you eat, the more toxins you ingest because of what's being sprayed and what's built in naturally. So you've got to be very careful where you're getting your fat and your protein sources. Animal fats and animal proteins are probably going to be the best option for you. So don't be scared of them. They're very good for you. It's going to do wonders for your brain. In fact, there's a guy here in the greater Phoenix area. I think he's down in Mesa. He opened up, and this is probably 7-8 years ago, he opened up a dementia care facility. And then he learned about a carnivore diet, which is just animal product, essentially, animal fats and meats. And he put all his dementia patients onto a carnivore diet. And within, I think it was within less than a year, we're talking anywhere from 6 to 8, 9 months, he sent 7 of his patients back home again because their dementia had been reversed. They were able to cope and function in society again. Now, he said it wasn't the best business model because he's sending patients home, but there's enough other people to replace those 7, you know, so he always had people coming in. But my point is, The glucose is killing us, but the fats are not. The fats are feeding your brain. There's no insulin resistance going on in the brain. So it's super important. All right. A great way to start your day would to be with some protein shake, which has got your amino acids. Again, you need the amino acids to build your body. So protein shake, and then if you get onto a Pro Vitality pack there, it has omega-3s in it. And omega-3, again, is an animal fat. All right. Whenever I talk to people about consuming animal fats like butter, for example, or the bit of fat that's on the meat, they're always like, oh, we can't do that. It's animal fats. But has anybody ever told them that omega-3 oils comes from an animal? It's an animal fat. And we all know that omega-3 is good for us, not so? It's good for all sorts of things, blood pressure, inflammation, which is part of dementia, blood thinning. So omega-3, animal fat, go for it. Carotenoids are going to protect the fat in your system from becoming oxidized. We do not want oxidized fat in our system because that's a problem. So carotenoids will protect it, it'll give it that coating, and it'll stop it from becoming oxidized. Your treonine, more oils. Oils are important. Every cell in your body needs the treonine oils, and it also needs the omega-3 oils. If you go look in a cell membrane, you're going to see omega-3s in there. You're going to see cholesterol in there. You're going to see your treonine oils in there. So very important to get your treonine. And then the multivitamins and the minerals, just again, some extra nourishment for the cells to keep them working and to keep them healthy. So omega-3s, let's talk about this just for a second. Neolife just recently updated their omega-3. They no longer call it salmon oil because the salmon is not the bulk ingredient of the omega-3. So they just found it's misleading to call it that. All right. We do still have salmon oil in the omega-3 along with tuna, mackerel, sardines, and there was another one. I forget. Somebody will know. All right. But we have 5 different fish that we get all our omega-3s from. And it's vital for brain development, especially in babies, but it's also vital for brain maintenance in adults as we age. Because a lot of us, I'm thinking people my age and then maybe a bit older. So anywhere from, let me think here, 45, maybe 40 years old, all the way through 70, 80 years old. That age bracket, we've grown up over the last 50 years being told to eat a low-fat diet. And a low-fat diet is killing us because your brain needs the fat. Well, I remember as a kid, the only people that got Alzheimer's disease were people like my grandmother who turned 99 last week, 99 years old, still going strong. But they grew up eating fat, all right, butter, bacon fat, lard, whatever you call it. That was part of the way they grew up. So they had a very good start. But we've been told for the last 50 years not to eat the stuff. Now, like I said, when I was a kid, only old people got dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Now, 55 plus, it's getting younger and younger and younger where people are getting Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive issues. They're forgetting where they put the keys, and then they remember where they put the keys, so they go there to get the keys, and they forget why they're going there. So, it just becomes this vicious runaround circle. So, here's a question for you folks. What's the best thing about Alzheimer's disease? Anybody? All right. Well, Easter has just passed, so the best thing about Alzheimer's disease, you can hide your own Easter eggs. How's that? And then have fun finding them. All right, so omega-3s, again, it's an animal fat, very, very good for the brain, amongst other things. All right, lipotropic, and we didn't mention this in any of the factors that I pointed out earlier, but vitamin B is super important for the brain because it's going to help your homocysteine levels, which is going to be good for the heart, all right? And it also keeps your cholesterols, your fats emulsified in your bloodstream. The last thing you want is to have your cholesterol being clumped up and being, unable to move smoothly through your bloodstream. So the lipotropic factors that are in there, the choline, the inositol, some of the other B's in there, all of that is going to keep your cholesterol, your fats in your bloodstream emulsified, so it can get to the brain, it can go do what it needs to do, it can get to the rest of your body, it can get to all the cells that your body needs. Super important to keep that cholesterol, that fat, those animal fats flowing correctly. So just more on the B. Mental clarity. We all need a bit of mental clarity, especially as we get older. Going back to my grandmother who turned 99 last week, about 2 years ago, I spoke to her. I said, "So, Gran," I said, "how are you doing?" She says, "You know what, Tony, from the neck up, I'm doing great. But from the neck down, not so good." 97 years old, the brain is still ticking. When I was over in South Africa, just 2 Novembers ago, when Levon was also there, I went to visit my Gran, and I walked in, and she's sitting in her little lounge at the old age home or the retirement center, wherever she was at. And she's sitting there doing a crossword puzzle, 97 years old. All right. So that mental clarity, still very sharp. And it's because of, I believe, because of her diet over the years of not being messed up, still believing the old way of eating. So next thing is some tray, which again is some antioxidants for your brain, help keep things working properly. It's going to help to balance those inflammatory factors in your brain. And again, inflammation is a challenge. Inflammation and oxidation, those are the two twins, the evil twins of aging and disease. So we have to limit the oxidation and the inflammation in our bodies. And this, the tray, remember I spoke about the blood-brain barrier earlier? Well, this is able to cross through that and get into the brain where it can protect your brain from all the oxidants trying to come in there and take over and kill you, or at least kill your brain. So very good. And then we also need a bunch of other antioxidants like the flavonoids from the green tea. It helps in memory processing, which is important. We want to be able to still process things and recall. Something happened yesterday, you need to know what happened yesterday and recall it again. So we've got to get the brain working, storing things. I know a lot of people say they can't remember anything anymore. They say their hard drive is full. They can't put any more information in there. But the brain, we only use 10% of our brain, I swear. And I think some people even less than that. But let's not get personal. All right, beta guard to help protect from the junk that's around us coming in into our system, exhaust fumes, stuff in the air. It's just, you go fill up your car with gas, there's those fumes that come out of that tank, the petrol tank there. All of that's getting into our system, and we have to be able to process that and get it out. Zinc, important for helping to prevent things like amnesia, all right, for learning difficulties, amongst other things, all right. In fact, my son was sitting here playing. They had some other game going on here about 2 weeks ago, and he came to the office, he grabbed a bottle of zinc and went and gave it to one of his friends, and he said, "Yeah, you need this." And the guy's like, "Why?" Austin says, "Well, my dad says, if you stink, you need zinc." So the guy got the message, and he actually got him signed up earlier this morning. But he said to Austin, he says, "Thanks. I appreciate the fact that you told me." He says, "because not many people will tell me, or tell their friend, listen, you stink." So that we're not talking about the brain on that particular story, but zinc is important for a bunch of things, including the brain. All right. And then the carotenoids, again, it's going to protect your cognitive function because it's going to keep that cholesterol, that oil that we're trying to get into our diet from going bad. And then finally, mind enhancement complex herbs. They just, they like, what's the word I'm looking for? Backup support for all your nutrients. All right. So this is just helps with your circulation. Make sure that everything's flowing like it should. You want to get fresh oxygen to the brain. good for your nervous system, and then it also increases your antioxidant activity, which is important again because we don't want things to become oxidized. Oxidation and inflammation are going to kill us. Just two things. All right. So we need to take care of those. All right, folks, that is that for that little PowerPoint presentation. I hope there was some information in there that sunk in. I think the most important thing to remember there is the sugar is killing us. We have to remember the fact that the sugar is killing us, whether you like it or not. I know we like sugar. I'm not talking about liking sugar. I'm talking about liking the fact that sugar kills us. So, does anybody have any questions regarding brain health, cognitive function? How much sugar can we eat? Should we eat? How much butter can we eat? Should we eat? Anything like that. And that's open to everybody else that's on the Zoom call as well. Let me get my gallery up here. You'll see everybody. All right.
Anybody with their hand raised? Also, can you go over, you already talked about the C word, but how detrimental is sugar to the, if you're battling the C word at the beach?
It's killing you, put it that way. End of story. You are feeding that Levon, what's the alternative terminology that we can use?
Fast growing cells.
Okay, yeah. Fast growing or fast multiplying cells, because that's what happens is when, and that's why I said earlier, it is a mitochondrial malfunction. Your mitochondria is responsible for providing the energy. All right. So you now have a cell that has lost its marbles and is now dividing faster than it should. Those mitochondria need to divide as well. Every cell in your body has at least one mitochondria, one little battery pack. That's the power plant for that cell. And it requires fuel. And glucose is a fuel. So the more glucose you have in your system, the more that thing's just going to suck it all up. Has anybody ever gone for a screening for any type of a immune system problem? If not, I haven't either. But I've heard from people that say if they go for like a cancer screening, okay, the way the doctors test for this, they make you drink a glucose solution or they pump one into your arm. All right. And then they scan you. And wherever this thing highlights, like the 4th of July, there's something going on there. That is a super concentrated glucose area. Now, why is it super concentrated there? Because there are so many cells in that area trying their best to get as much glucose as they can. And that's where they can pinpoint where the problem is in your body. All right. They know. Pump you full of glucose and we can find out where the problem is. So, how bad is glucose for fast replicating cells or dysfunctional mitochondria? Glucose is just, it's killing you. It is absolutely killing us. All right. We all have, and I remember this from early days in high school, and that didn't make sense back then because, you know, you're only, what, 12, 13 years old, whatever. We all have cancer cells in us. Okay, so how come some people die and some don't? Well, if your body is strong enough to take care of it, it can overpower them, chew them up, and spit them out. All right, so we have to keep our immune system strong to take care of things like that. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we aren't feeding those cells. So we have to starve them. And one of the best ways to starve them is don't put the glucose into your body. And the question is, where does the glucose come from? All right. When I talk about sugar, people think table sugar, you know, the stuff you put in your coffee. That's one of them. But sugar also comes from bagels. And sugar also comes from that super whole wheat, whole grain muffin It might be whole wheat, it might be whole grain. It's still a muffin. All right. Where else does sugar come from? Bread, Oreo cookies, pasta. That's where sugar comes from. Everything that's baked, if it comes out of the oven, it's sugar. It's glucose at the end of the day. All right. And Jennifer at the back there has got some amazing alternatives to a lot of these types of things that we like to eat. All right. We all like a little, anybody like a little dessert every once in a while? Anybody? Just me? Am I the only one that has a problem? Okay. I see them out there. All right. So, you know that saying you have to pick your poison? Well, literally that's what this is. you got to pick your poison. Which one's going to kill me the slowest? I'm going to go with that one. All right. But yeah, Levant, to answer your question, glucose, sugar, carbohydrates, simple carbs, complex carbs. Take away the simple and the complex, you're still left with carbohydrates. All right. It's just that complex carbohydrates are going to take longer to become glucose. That's all. But they still become glucose. All right. How many people still have 100% faith in the CDC? Anybody? Good. Nobody. Awesome. All right. So if they tell you that complex carbs are better than simple carbs, yeah. It's the same as them telling you 5 COVID shots are better than 4. All right. Anybody believe that? No. Okay, good. So we have to be careful.
And
We have to be careful.
Talk in code. I'm recording, so talk in code.
I'll try my best. You know, us South Africans, we just call a spade a spade. All right.
We have a couple of questions in the house. Nancy's got her hand raised.
All right, Nancy, go for it. Shout.
I remember it's really been like several years ago when Tony came for meetings and stuff. I remember him saying a couple of times that a couple of extra salmon oil would prevent you from getting Alzheimer's. And I didn't see it listed in the video that we just watched, the different things. I didn't see any salmon oil. So have there been new products now that maybe take the place of extra salmon oil?
So what used to be salmon oil is now just called omega-3. And it was in the presentation. I think it was the second slide that I did after the breakfast pack, the breakfast solution. We did omega-3. Omega-3 used to be salmon oil plus, but they've changed the name to omega-3. So salmon oil was omega-3s. It's just that the bulk of the oils in that capsule came from salmon. But because Neolife is concerned about the sustainability of the salmon, they've decided to not use as much oil from salmon, but rather incorporate a 5th fish into the blend. And we still get that same profile of omega-3s, the same ratio. Everything's the same. It's just that the amount of oil from the salmon has reduced. And like I said, Neolife doesn't want to be calling it salmon oil if salmon oil isn't the most abundant oil in the pack. All right. It's just misleading on the label. That's all. All right. But yes, salmon oil, we're going to have to change our verbiage here from salmon oil down to omega-3s.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Because I would often talk to people and say, you need to take some salmon oil. Oh, what's that for? What's omega-3s? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I know about omega-3. But nobody knows about salmon oil. It's just that we labeled ours salmon oil because that was where they got most of the oils.
Alzheimer's runs in my family. My dad died from it. Would you say like 2 a day? What is your dosage?
Okay, because we're being recorded, I'm not allowed to give dosages and what have you. But you know, if I ever felt like I was going downhill mentally, I would probably take at least 6 omega-3s a day, you know. because I don't want to get Alzheimer's, you know. I don't want to get to the point where I forget to take my omega-3s. So I'll take 6. I would even take 9. You know, if I find myself trying to swim upstream in the shower, then I know I've taken too much. All right. But until then, I'll be okay taking a bunch, you know. But yeah, omega-3 is very good for the brain. Very good for the brain. And it runs in your family because the recipes, the food choices run in your family. I'm a firm believer that there's no DNA, there's no Alzheimer's DNA built into a person in a family line. Okay? It's 100%, as far as I'm concerned, 100% food choices. That's it. All right. How old was your dad when they diagnosed him with Alzheimer's?
I'm thinking he was 80, but he didn't eat very well. So
okay. So
yeah,
you've just
what he said, yeah.
Yeah, you've just kind of answered that question. So he was about 80 years old and he didn't eat well. And he probably didn't eat well for 10, 15, 20 years before he was 80 years old. All right. The problem is we're finding Alzheimer's or cognitive decline in people at a much younger age these days. Much younger. You know, I swear it's in teenage children as well because they forget everything you tell them to do. So unless that's a teenage DNA thing, yeah. But no, it is a problem, and it's because of the lack of oils in our diet. Our fat-free diet is killing us. It is killing us because fat is a fuel, and if you live on a fat-free diet, you have to get your fuel from something else, which is, Jennifer?
Sugar.
Carbohydrates, sugar. Yep. Yep. All right. There's 2 fuel sources for the body, and there's a third one, which is a backup one. The 2 main ones are glucose and fat. All right. The backup one is protein. But you shouldn't be getting your fuel from your protein because then you'll die eventually. When that starts happening, you know you got problems. All right. That's for people that are stuck on a deserted island. They've eaten all the bananas and coconuts and there's nothing else to eat. They don't know how to catch fish. They're useless. So the body will eventually start eating itself. It'll start with the fat. When the fat is finished, your body wants to keep you alive. It will convert your muscles into glucose to keep you alive. All right. So I say protein is a third fuel source, but it's an emergency backup one. Fat and carbohydrates are your 2 that are going to give you the energy to live. And if you cut one out, you can live on with just the other one alone. But if you cut the fat out and you live just on carbohydrates, you are going to get all sorts of challenges, cognitive issues, sugar control issues, blood sugar control issues. You're going to start losing ankles and feet and legs below the knee, and because of sugar-related problems. All right. You're going to start getting kidney failure. You're going to start getting swelling of the ankles, and the doctors tell you ate too much salt. Well, no, you ate too much sugar. Sugar causes blood pressure problems. Sugar causes water retention, not salt. Okay. So yeah, live a fat-free diet. Don't worry, we got medication to keep you alive, and you can all carry your oxygen tank around with you, and you can live to 100. It's going to be hell, but you can live to 100. All right. A friend of ours back in South Africa, this is a Greek family. The dad had something wrong with him. I think he was diagnosed as a diabetic patient, and they had him on medication, and he had heart disease problems, all sorts of things. So he was on a bunch of medication. Well, anyway, the old man died. So they went off to Greece, they buried him, and as is the ritual over in Greece, you bury the man, and a year later or 2 years later, you come take that bag of bones and that casket out the ground because they need it for somebody else. Okay, they're running out of space, essentially. So they go there a year or two later, I forget how long it was, and they dig up this coffin, open it up, and here's the old man, only about 40 or 50% decomposed. And they realized it's because of all that medication that this man was on. It killed all the bugs and stuff inside of him that are supposed to decompose him. All right. Medication is there for a reason, short term, end of story. Don't ever let a doctor tell you that your blood pressure is out of whack. You need to be on a medication the rest of your life. If that doctor says that, get up, smack him on the head, leave, and go find a different doctor. Okay? Medication, drugs are a short-term solution. Short-term, 3 to 6 months maximum. We were not designed to live on man-made drugs after a certain age. That's not the way the good Lord made us. Okay? So don't be living on chemical drugs. They are not there to make you better. Whatever's on your plate is going to make you better or worse. Depends what's on your plate. All right. I suppose I should get off my little soapbox here, Levon, and just answer 1 or 2 questions without without an attitude.
Anybody else have a question for the engineer that hunts for health?
Yes. So Tony, question is that when somebody has edema in their legs and you go back to sugar, would that also be caused just from what you said, water retention?
Yeah. Sugar is the problem because your kidneys have this little feedback loop, where they control things and send signals back to do something, this, that, and the next thing. And when you get glucose and insulin passing through your kidneys, that feedback loop that is supposed to get rid of the water is interrupted. So you aren't getting rid of that much water in your system. So now it starts collecting down in the ankles, the legs. And that's why you find a lot of diabetic patients have swollen legs, ankles at least, all right? I mean, you can walk around town, in the summertime when people are walking around here in shorts and flip-flops, all right? Jennifer, flip-flop, ring a bell? Philippe, Philip?
Felipe Felipe.
Anyways, and you can see from a person's legs that this guy has some serious health conditions. He's either diabetic or he's got heart conditions because the circulation sucks. All right. So yeah, it's sugar. And here's the thing. Water in your system, water molecules follow minerals. So if you have too much magnesium, which is a mineral, what happens? Anybody know? Come on, folks, I've taught you this. Is your cognitive decline already set in?
Diarrhea.
If you have too much magnesium, you get diarrhea. Okay, why is that? Well, water follows the minerals. So you've got all this magnesium sitting in your gut and the water is just going there. So now you've got a gut filled with water. And that's got to come out at some point. And it does. It comes flushing right out. Okay, that's why you get diarrhea after too much magnesium, because the water has followed the magnesium into your colon. Salt is a mineral. So if you have salt in your bloodstream, water is going to follow it. It'll go through your kidneys. It's going to get diluted, filtered out, and you pee it out. But as soon as you throw glucose and insulin in the mix and you put it through your kidneys, that doesn't happen anymore, because that little feedback loop in the kidney is now disrupted, and now you're on shedding the water. So you're going to start retaining it. Hence the edema problem. All right. So again, salt's not a problem. Sugar is the problem. Sugar, 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 sugar is the problem. Yes, ma'am.
Has edema, then they should take magnesium.
If a person has edema, you say. Um,
I don't have any issues with it, just curious.
yeah. I'm not going to say that that's the answer to the problem, but it's going to do, there's going to be no harm done by taking magnesium. But why do they have the edema? Find that out. What's the diet like? How much sugar is involved? Cut the sugars out. All right. Add more salt into your diet. When you grill up a piece of steak, put some salt on it. Eat salted butter, you know. Get more salt into your diet. Make yourself a salt solution that you add a little bit into you. Every time you drink something, have a drink of that salty water. There's a recipe I'll give to you. But that will start to flush things out. Cucumbers work very well as a diuretic. So you can take cucumbers, that'll help flush out some of that extra water. All right. But just magnesium by itself, not necessarily going to make the edema go away. It might down the road, but I would start with a diet. Look at what they're eating and not eating. Very important. So
Time to follow your train.
So Tony, would that
Apparently I
be
followed off track.
a reason why multi-min works like well, it flushes the water off of you?
yeah, if you take too much of it, then yeah.
Or just our multi-min, especially for women, you know, bloating and things like that, it helps tremendously.
Yeah, it will. All right. Because like I say, water follows the minerals and it's got to go through your kidneys. It'll all get flushed out. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
I see Deborah had her hand up at one point. I don't know if she still had a question or if she was just responding to something, but if there's anybody else, Chrissy, are you raising a hand or are you just swiping across your phone there? All right. Well, Ms. Levon, any questions from you? I know you've always got a question or two.
I will. This. For those of you who like to share the Pro Vitality, I love the new fast facts that are in your back office on the Pro Vitality pack. And I happened to go down to Office Depot and had some of them laminated. Also, the new formula of the omegas. Here is a comparison chart. So Jen, I'll give you one of these that you can have in your shop, but it really does help. It reduces the 10,000 words you would have to explain to somebody why ours is different. You just show them this, because I guarantee you they're buying one of these. And when they see that one of these is trash and that this is triumph victory, wow, what a difference. And then to explain, this is what it's upside down, as I put it in the camera, but I love what Tony talked about, the Pro Vitality Pack, how it covers so many things. Brilliant, just brilliant. But each one is described in this, and it explains what its purpose and why they formulated it this way, addressing what Tony talked about, this cell and the function of the cell. And when you address the function of the cell, then you reduce the oxidative stress and boost the immune system. Then when you reduce the inflammation, Then when you cover 22 vitamins and minerals, including K1, K2, and biotin, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So for those of you who are wanting to share in the business, I have a few of these up here that I just had printed off. Also, I did do a few of these, which is the new Omega brochure. So I had that laminated to
Beautiful.
front and back side. You'll probably need a little magnification glasses to read it. They couldn't expand it anymore, but I think it's really great to have because it shows the clinical studies. It shows the fast facts and the brochure information. Again, highlighting what makes our omegas different, what makes our formulas different. So I did that for those of you who want a set. Just come see me and I'll be glad to share them with you that are sharing with others. And with that being said, I am going to stop the recording